Hello, and in this lesson, we're going to discuss AWS Elastic File System, or otherwise known as EFS. So over here in the Orion papers, let's click on EFS. And then also over here in the AWS console, EFS can be found under storage. Now I know that over here in the Orion papers, I have EFS under EC2. And that is because even though that EFS is a storage system for AWS, which is why it's listed here under storage, it is currently only used by EC2. So I included in the EC2 because it is more related to EC2 as opposed to S3 or Glacier. So again, that's why I have it in the Orion papers under the EC2 section and not under the storage or the S3 section. So over here in the AWS console, let's click on EFS. And let's click on Create a File System because we're going to do that in a second. But first, over here in the Orion papers, let's learn a little bit about what EFS is. So EFS is a storage option for EC2 that allows for scalable storage options. So EFS storage capacity is elastic. So this means that the storage capacity will increase and decrease as you add or remove files. So applications running on an EC2 instance using EFS will always have the storage they need without having to provision and attach larger storage instances. So as with EBS volumes, when you create an EBS volume, it has a set size. So say you set it at 20 gigabytes. If you need to have a larger EBS volume, you would have to take a snapshot of that EBS volume, create a larger EBS volume, then restore the data from the EBS snapshot. But here with the Elastic File System, you can just have one file system, one volume, and it will increase and decrease with size as needed. EFS is also fully managed, so there's no maintenance required. It supports the Network File System version 4.0 and 4.1, otherwise known as NFS version 4 protocols when mounting. That's important to remember. And for best performance with EFS, you should be using it with an EC2 AMI with Linux kernel version 4.0 or newer. So what are some of the other benefits of Elastic File System? Well, the EFS file system can be accessed by one or more EC2 instances at the same time. So this allows for shared file access across all of your EC2 instances. So an application that spans multiple EC2 instances can access the same data. So again, this is a great benefit of EFS, is that one, it is elastic, but it is also shareable amongst many EC2 instances. EFS file systems can also be mounted to on-premise servers when connected to your VPC via AWS Direct Connect. So it's very important to understand that you can only mount an EFS file system to an on-premise server when connected to your VPC via AWS Direct Connect. So this allows you to migrate data from your on-prem servers to EFS and or use it as a backup solution. EFS can scale to petabytes in size while also maintaining low latency and high levels of throughput. And one of the other great benefits of EFS is that you only pay for the amount of storage that you are using. So as with an EBS volume where you're going to pay for whatever the provisioned volume size is, regardless of how much of it you use, here you're only paying directly for what you're using. So if you're only using 20 gigabytes worth of space, then you're only paying for 20 gigabytes worth of space. If you're using 50 gigabytes of space, then you're paying for 50 gigabytes of space. If you're using 50 gigabytes of space now and paying for that now and then delete half, so you now have 25 gigabytes worth of data on the volume, well, then you're only now going to pay for 25 gigabytes worth of space. So again, a great benefit of it being scalable and elastic is that you're only paying for what you use. So how about security? Well, you can control file system access through POSIX permissions. You use the VPC for network access control and IAM for API access control. And you can encrypt data at rest using AWS Key Management Service, otherwise known as KMS. So some of the most common areas that use Elastic File System is when you're looking at big data and analytics, media processing workflows, or web serving and content management. So now that we know a little bit about what EFS is, let's take a look at how we actually create a file system in the AWS console and then attach it to two distinct EC2 instances. So over here, I'll actually jump out of this here, and let's just take a look at the diagram here. So here I have an EC2 instance. This will just represent one EC2 instance, and here we have a second EC2 instance. So here we have EFS in the middle because data can be shared between two EC2 instances or more, however many you want to attach to it. But in this example, we're just going to create two EC2 instances and put a file and see that we can share a file and access it from both EC2 instances through EFS. So over here in the AWS console, let's go about creating our file system. So the first thing we need to do is select the VPC that we want this file system to be provisioned into. So for me, I want to launch it into the lab-vpc VPC. We see here that it's already selecting two availability zones and subnets, but let's just make sure this is what we want. So availability zone US East 1A, US East 1B, that works. But I do want to launch it into the two public subnets in each of those availability zones. So lab subnet 1 and lab subnet 2, both public in those two availability zones. Perfect. Okay, so let's go to next step. Here we need to give our file system a name. So I'm just going to call this EFS test. And you can also here select between general purpose performance or max IO performance. And you can also enable encryption here by selecting this here, but I'm going to leave these just as default for now. Now I'm going to click on next step. And I can review all the options that I have set. Everything looks good, so I'm going to select create file system. Now, it may take a few minutes for the file system to be provisioned, so while that's actually occurring, I'm going to switch over to EC2 in another tab, and I'm going to create two EC2 instances that I can use for this example. So I'm going to run through this fairly quickly at this point, but I'm just going to use Amazon Linux AMI, T2 Micro, make sure that I select the proper VPC, and make sure that I select the two availability zones or the two subnets that I just used to provision EFS into. So that will be US East 1, the public subnet. Make sure that auto-assign public IP address is enabled. Everything else I can just kind of fly through a default here. Click on launch. Let's create a new key pair. We'll call this EFS, and we'll download that key pair, launch the instance. So then we'll go back in. I'm going to provision a second EC2 instance here. Make sure I select the proper VPC, and this time I'm going to select the public subnet in US East 1B. Make sure that I enable auto-assign public IP address, and then we can just breeze through the rest of the defaults here. And I will choose the EFS key pair. Okay, so here I have my two instances, and I can even just label them here. This is the one in 1A. So I can just put EFS 1A and EFS 1B, just so we know we can keep track of them. Okay, so now what we want to do is let's go back over to our EFS here, and everything should be provisioned now. Let's refresh this here. And it looks like it may be creating a few other things here, but let's click on here on Amazon EC2 mount instructions, because it actually gives us detailed instructions of what we need to do in order to mount this file system on both of our EC2 instances. Now, the Amazon Linux AMI already comes with the NFS client installed. So we don't have to follow this step here unless you're using a EC2 instance that does not have that already installed on it, in which case you can just use these commands to do that. But we're going to skip that for now. But what we need to do is we need to SSH into both of our EC2 instances and make a directory. So we're going to follow this step here using the sudo make dir EFS command. So I'm going to go back over to EC2, and let's actually sort by instance state here. Okay, so we have EFS 1B, EFS 1A. So let's go to the 1A first, and let's click on connect. And let's just grab the command here to SSH into it. And I'm going to switch over to the terminal. So I'm in my downloads directory. That's where I've downloaded the PEM file to. And now I actually have to make sure I run the chmod 400 command on it to give the file proper permissions. All right, now I can go ahead and just copy in the command to SSH into this particular instance. Yes. Okay, so now I'm logged into instance number 1, but now we also want to log into instance number 2. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to create a new tab. I'll have to navigate into my downloads directory. But I do have to go back to the AWS console to get the login command for this particular instance. This will be EFS1B. So let's click on connect. Copy that. And then here we can log into that. Perfect. Okay, so on this tab, I have the EFS1A. On this tab, I have the EFS1B. So now let's go back to the terminal and let's just look at what the command was that we needed to input. So back over here on Elastic File Systems, we have to make the directory EFS on both of these EC2 instances. Okay, so now if we look here, we see that we have that particular directory created on both EC2 instances. So let's go back and see what else we need to do. Okay, so next, step 3 is we have to mount the file system using the DNS name. Now here we actually have an error or notification that says your Amazon VPC is not currently configured to enable mounting using DNS names. So to enable this feature, go to the Amazon VPC console. In the action menu, select Edit DNS Resolution and Edit DNS Hostnames and make sure they are both set to yes. So over here, let's exit out of here. Let's go to VPC. And you may or may not get that particular error on your VPC depending on how you currently have things configured. But if you are getting that same error, you can come to your VPC here, click on Actions, click on Edit DNS Resolution, and make sure that it's set to yes, that is. Now also check Edit DNS Hostnames. So here, see that's set to no for me. So I want to set that to yes and click Save. Then back over here, let's close out of this. Let's refresh. And then go back into the Amazon EC2 mount instructions. And we'll scroll down. And we see here now that that notification is gone. We have a command here to mount the file system. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to copy this and go back to the terminal. And I'm going to go ahead and mount that file system to the EFS1B here. So we're on the tab for EFS1B. Now this is taking too long, and this is taking too long for a specific reason because I actually have a security groups issue right now. So I'm going to hit Control-C to exit out of that. I'm actually going to now go back to the AWS console. Because actually what it does not tell you here is that you actually have to add the default VPC security group to your EC2 instances. So this allows communication to your EC2 instances. So over here under VPC, under this tab here, I'm actually going to go back to our EC2 instances. Click on Running Instances. Click on the first one here. Then under Actions, I'm going to go to Networking and then Change Security Groups. And I'm actually going to add the default VPC security group. And then I'm going to click on this one as well. And I'm going to go to Networking and add the default security group as well. Now, if we take a look down here, we see that we have the Launch Wizard 17, which is the security group that I created alongside with this particular EC2 instance that allowed for SSH communication over port 22. But the default VPC security group, if we look under inbound rules here, we see that it's allowing all traffic from any other resource that has this particular security group attached. So that will allow communication internally inside the VPC between the EFS volume and the EC2 instances. So back over here, let me just copy this again to make sure that I have it correctly. I'm going to go back over to the terminal and let's just run this command again. And this time we should see it mount. Okay, perfect. So now that the mount has occurred, let's verify that the mount has occurred. And we can verify that by typing in the command df -h. And here we see the current volumes that are mounted on our EC2 instance. And right here, we see the volume that we just mounted. So this is the EFS volume. And we can see the size, what's used, and obviously the directory are mounted on home/EC2 user, which is the user we're currently logged in on, and then in the EFS directory. So the EFS directory, if I just type ls here, this directory here is now that file system. It is now that shared Elastic EFS file system. So if I change directory into it, cd EFS, And I can actually now just create a file. We're going to see now that it's empty, but I can create a file. So I can do sudo touch shared file.txt. And now we have that txt file, that shared file.txt file, in or being used or placed on the EFS file system. So now let's go over to our EFS-1A EC2 instance, and let's run the same command. I'm not quite sure why we got that error there, but let's go back to the console real quick here, and let's just grab this again. Maybe I had an extra space in there or something. There we go. Looks like that mounted. So we can run the exact same command, which is df space -h, to make sure that it is mounted, and we can see that it is. Now, when we navigate into the EFS directory here, we should now see that same shared file.txt file. So let's give that a try. And there we go. We see that we have the shared file.txt. So we have mounted the exact same file system, the EFS file system, to both EC2 instances. And we can see from both EC2 instances, we can access and view the exact same file. So that's how we can use EFS to mount the same file system to 2 or more EC2 instances and allowed for shared file resources. And also, if we look under the size here and available, the size here, right, this will grow and shrink as we put files into this directory and mount them onto the file system. So in summary, the important things to remember about EFS is that it is an elastic and shareable file system. So you can mount it to more than one EC2 instance, and those EC2 instances can share those resources. And also, it is elastic, meaning that it will increase or decrease in size based on the amount of data that you put on it, and you only pay for the data that you put on it at any given time. And with that, we will conclude this lesson. Thank you for watching. You may now move on.